Weather Wagers, we're back.
Hello.
We got Dan Tomaso. We got David Shiner. Give a little wave. And we got me, merely Brett Thacker here. And we are so excited because, listen, this is what we call sort of the off-season, right? Because when we talk betting and we talk wagering,
The in-betweener.
Football is the biggest, we all know. It drives eyeballs, it drives money, it drives casino revenue, it drives betting.
I mean, people are still talking about it even though it's over.
Correct, and we are too.
Right.
But now that we're into the off-season, our focus shifts less on picking games than it does to talking about them and talking
100%.
about things that we care about in the off-season. So we're going to be having some special guests on in the coming weeks. We've got a laundry list of some really great interviews. We're also going to talk about baseball and eventually get into picking some games there and talking
I'm ready.
about the
so
weather
ready. Yes.
for some of these games, because the weather, it's trying to turn. It is trying to become spring. We're at that sort of fake spring time.
Yep. You're kind of fooled every day as to what you're going to get.
Exactly. And we do have some weather this weekend that we are going to talk about here that could affect a lot of people, because we're not just interested in our local audience. We care about those of you in Central PA that watch us on ABC 27 News Plus, but we know we have people listening and watching all over because we are in podcast form. And speaking of that,
We're global.
We're global. Here's where you can find us, as usual, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, which is growing. You've seen those numbers.
Yes, I have.
Amazon, YouTube. We had a big episode on YouTube for us with the Super Bowl. And you can always get us on abc27.com and ABC27 Plus, which is our CTV app.
And that's doing very well, too. I mean, that is gaining momentum. We love to see it.
And, of course, good old-fashioned broadcast TV, which is free. We
always throw a little teaser out there, and I have to say that last week's teaser, Brett, I just want to make mention of this, with you and the snow in the face, was a crowd pleaser. I mean, people love that.
Really?
Yes.
Even our buttoned-up evening team.
So, your self-deprecation, they loved it.
Good. Well, listen, I lost that bet, but the reality of it is I lost the battle, but I won the war.
Yes, you did.
Because we had a football betting recap that we're going to talk about, but the season ended, and I want to show you the final record again here, because for those of you paying attention, what we do is we picked about 10 games a week against the spread.
It's a lot of games in the end.
We picked games that we knew weather was going to be a factor. We picked the biggest games of the week when there was not a lot of weather, and I ended up at 101 and 96, which I'm pretty proud of. But I also think you should be proud of your record.
I flipped it.
Anytime you can get within an inch of 500, I think you've got to be proud, because these are not just picking games. It's picking games against the spread. And I guess now that the season is over, I thought it was pretty tight. What did you find fun, easy, hard about this past season? And what did you personally struggle with when you had to look over these games and pick them against the spread?
So I think the number one thing that I've noticed since we've been doing this podcast is the overall parity in college football and the NFL. And you're seeing fewer of these overall dominant teams. Now, you could say Indiana was dominant this year. I will understand that argument. But for the most part, the SEC was completely unpredictable. At times, the Big Ten was unpredictable, although I still think the Big Ten really stood out this year. I think my hardest struggle was figuring out the NFL. And you saw it in the playoffs. Teams that we never would have really expected made noise. And whether it was the Colts in the beginning of the season and their hot streak to their demise in the end, it was hard to figure out what they were. The upstart Jacksonville Jaguars, the upstart Broncos, the upstart Patriots. It was a whole different look in the AFC. And then the flip side, which we are still heartbroken about as Eagles fans, the Eagles just couldn't put it all together. It was another one of these in-between seasons where they had talent but couldn't necessarily win each game they were supposed to win. It was a challenge, I will say. And normally I say the NFL kind of sorts itself out, especially when you have the Kansas City Chiefs being dominant over the years, other teams being dominant over the years. This was a different scenario this year.
Well, there was two unlikely contenders for the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
You had Seattle and New England that nobody really saw before the season, two unlikely quarterbacks that led their teams there, and they got there for a variety of reasons, not just the quarterbacks, but it was very interesting. Now, the Super Bowl played out like we did, and that's the funny part. In picking these games, and some against the spread, some just seem easy to pick, and sometimes they go that way, and then other times they don't. And I had actually, I'm in another NFL pool that I won, by the way. I actually... but I actually...
A friend of the podcast also patted you on the back.
Yes. I will say, though, that I actually thought the NFL was not that difficult this year, which I know you might say, what do you mean? Well, again, there were some dominant teams, but it wasn't the dominant teams of the past. And I think sometimes, as you pointed out, Dan, we get stuck in our ways. And by we, I mean as a society, as a betting public.
Well, especially if the talent on the team doesn't change a whole lot.
Right. Like, who really saw the Chiefs missing the playoffs?
No,
I didn't. Who really saw the Patriots and Mike Vrabel turning that around as much
That
as
quickly,
they did?
sure.
Who saw the Bears do what they were able to do this year? So I think sometimes we do get stuck in our ways. You have to, especially if you want to try to be a successful bettor, get ahead of the curve sometimes. I found it very tough to do that in college. Usually, Vegas is behind on college football, definitely more focused on the pros. I've always found that I could kind of look ahead because that's what I like. We like college football. We pay attention. This year I did struggle with it a little bit, even some of the Penn State games. I mean, I didn't think Penn State would cover against Indiana, and we gave them their toughest game.
Yes, we did.
I did not see Miami doing what Miami was able to do. And then when it looked like they were going to run away with it, they dropped some games there to Louisville and SMU that were real head scratchers.
Can't
and
make
then
sense of it.
Then they get in to the championship game and come within a hair of winning it, sort of like Notre Dame did last year. So it really at times was perplexing, but I'm okay with that because I love the parity, and with the new rules and now we're going to, get into revenue sharing this year in NIL, and our special guest today is going to talk about that. Dan, I think it's wide open again this year going into next season.
Extremely wide open, and a part of this is the craziness that is the transfer portal. Players getting paid, figuring out where their next stop's going to be, and what you're going to get out of that talent, which if anyone could tell me right now what you think the Big Ten is going to shake out as, I'm going to say you're crazy.
Yeah.
We think we know, but we really don't.
No, we don't. And again, we've mentioned that too. I know we had teased an interview with Mark Woganrich, a guy that has come on this podcast before. We're pushing that to next week. But one of the things we talked about in there was Penn State's easy schedule. And yeah, we don't have to play Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana. That is great. What if Michigan turns out to be that team? What if Washington turns out to be that team?
What if there's a team we're not thinking of that could make us stumble, a.k.a. Northwestern and UCLA this past year?
Right, and maybe Northwestern again this year. You just don't know.
The chip ship has landed.
Yes, but nonetheless, we had a bet, and we do this every season, and whoever wins, whoever has the winning record, the best record at the end of the year, doesn't have to be a winning record, but the best record at the end of the year. This year we bet a fancy steak dinner, and I believe I said to you it had to be at a fancy place, right? It had to be at a real fancy place. So Harvest Seasonal Grill and Wine Bar invited us to come and try some of their steaks, and not only did we try them, you were kind enough to invite Mr. Shiner.
Oh, of course. We got to have Shiner there. Absolutely.
And I greatly appreciated it.
Well, your stomach did. I can tell you that.
I can still taste it to this day.
I can too, and that's not a bad thing.
Unbelievable.
And you mentioned the desserts they have at this place. We've been there with our wives. This was nice. We got a chance to do a guy's day at the steakhouse. And they do have more there than just steak. But we had a chance to have Dan pay off his bet, and we wanted to show it to you. We took the cameras along, and we got rolling. So here it is. Check it out. Dan pays off our steak dinner bet.
All right, gentlemen, we are here. It is my time to shine. It's my wallet today. I am treating both of you, and myself too. I'll get the as well. But
yeah.
We are at the Susquehanna Shops right off of 81, just outside of Harrisburg, and we are at Harvest. Are you guys ready?
I am ready. It's a beautiful day, but I cannot wait to taste your money in there for a losing season. But you were close.
Yeah, I was close, and it was tight throughout. I lost my lead and gave it up to you. So congratulations. Let's head inside.
You get the door.
Yep, I'll get the door.
All right, let's do it.
After you.
Well, Dan, we are here.
We made it.
We have made it to Harvest Seasonal Grill and Wine Bar. You owe me a steak dinner.
I do.
Cheers.
Cheers. Congratulations, my friend.
To a great season.
Yes, it was
indeed.
fun.
We are pleased to be joined by Executive Chef Anthony Beaner here, and he's going to talk to us about Harvest, about the steaks we're going to eat, and about all kinds of things. So, Chef, thanks for coming on today.
I appreciate your time.
Talk to us about what makes Harvest Seasonal Grill and Wine Bar so unique.
So as a Central Pennsylvania regionally located concept, we're farm to table. We have such a great agriculture scene in our area. So we have a lot of interesting elements to bring in. We're also a very chef-driven concept. We change our menu 4 times a year.
Wow.
We offer something new every 3 months, in and out. We don't ever bring back last year's spring menu. We create a new spring menu for 2026. And then we also do focus more on a health-conscious diet.
Gotcha.
Not that everything we have here is salads. We have lots of delicious food that isn't necessarily under that 500-calorie mark. But that is what kind of separates us from our competitors.
Gotcha. Yeah, you mentioned the farm to table. So is that all local here to Central Pennsylvania, or where are you pulling it in from?
So we source locally whenever possible. Obviously, it gets a little difficult in the winter and so forth. So when we do have to source in a broader capacity, we always make sure that we partner with purveyors that meet the same standards that we're looking for as far as sustainability and how things are raised and grown.
Can you talk about just the overall quality? And you know, I've eaten here, you've eaten here, we love the taste of things, but you guys have a pretty high standard.
We do. We pride ourselves on sourcing the highest quality ingredients available. We have really talented chefs in all of our locations who want to work with what's best and when it's at its peak, and it just tastes better. I mean, the simplest thing to say is we want to make the best possible dish we can, and we can't do that without sourcing the best possible ingredients.
So, as a little bit of a backstory, the bet was about steak.
Yeah.
So, talk to us a little bit about the steak that's available here, what we're going to see today.
So what you gentlemen are going to be enjoying today is a prime New York strip. We source all of our beef from Pennsylvania ranches throughout the state.
Very cool.
Reaching the same standards as far as the beef and the quality. They do provide for all 8 of our locations. It's a USDA prime steak, grilled to perfection, served with some wonderful sized vegetables and potatoes. But we really like to think of that steak as the star of the plate.
We can't wait to try it.
Absolutely.
And for those locally here in Central PA, you have 2 locations, right?
So we have 2 in this area. We have both Harrisburg and Lancaster, and then we do have 5 additional locations in the Philadelphia metro area.
So we're going to get the steak.
Yep.
But I know you mentioned you like the desserts.
I do. Oh, that's right. Yes, of course. How could I forget?
You can't forget about
No.
that. Whenever I go out, people talk about these desserts that are in a cup, but talk about the creativity behind that.
So we change the desserts 4 times a year, just like the rest of our menu. We do have pastry chefs on staff at all of our locations that are creating these desserts every day. We try to be unique outside of the box, but they're all delicious and they're a perfect serving size. 2 of them is my preferred serving, but they are great.
I was going to say, I think the first time I was here and it came to the table, all of them together, I was so excited. It's really a unique experience.
Let me ask you this final question here, because I can tell in talking about this, you take pride in your work, you take pride in the food that you're offering customers. What do you like best about your job and what you get to do?
So it separates us from a lot of our competitors is we get a lot of room to be creative. We get a lot of room to kind of stay current on trends. We can try things. Even with our core menu, we change it every 3 months. So we have the ability to be flexible and try things, and not everything works. Most of it's fantastic, but we have the ability to sort of test things and keep growing and keep going to see what our guests love and want more of.
Chef, thank
Yeah,
you so
thank you
much.
again.
We
Thank
can't
you.
wait to taste the
Thank you.
food.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Well, the food has been prepared. We are ready to dig in. It looks fantastic, everybody.
Well, and I have to say, I'm so impressed. And Chef, can you just kind of run through what we have plated here today?
Yeah, absolutely. So in front of me here, we have our Pennsylvania Prime New York Strip, served with roasted haricot vert, Yukon Gold potatoes, and a Cabernet reduction. In the middle there, we do have our filet mignon, served over, again, Yukon Gold potatoes, mashed with cream and butter this time, and our roasted carrots with a shallot red wine demi-glace.
Sounds phenomenal.
Yeah, awesome.
Let's dig in.
All right.
Here we go.
I'm gonna start with first the filet.
I'm going to start with the filet.
Okay, me too.
Cheers, though.
Cheers
Cheers.
to another great season.
And congrats.
Oh, man.
Perfect medium rare, Joe.
Yes. The cook is amazing, and it really does melt in your mouth, doesn't
It
it?
does.
Very good.
Throw me some of the potatoes.
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you're-
yeah.
I just want to try and
Oh, here
take
we go.
some mashed here, too.
Can't go wrong here.
Take a carrot if you want. This one, try those greenies on. Scoop your potatoes. Try those mashed. They're buttery.
What did Mr. Food say? Ooh, it's so good.
Ooh, it's so good.
Yeah. Did you try the strip?
Yeah, I didn't get that far yet.
Oh, the flavor.
Yeah.
It's totally different.
The sauce is
The
good.
red wine
Yeah.
demi-glaze is amazing.
Yeah.
Pairs
Look
well
at
with the
that.
white.
You're a sophisticated man, David Schneider.
I wouldn't go that far.
Isn't there just something though about you're eating fresh vegetables, you're eating farm to table stuff.
Yeah.
It just tastes better.
100%. Not a bad size of a steak either.
No.
no, well that's just
Very
it.
hearty.
They know what they're doing, right?
When
And I usually stick with a fillet when the few times I get it when I'm out, but I have to go
They
strip.
might be selling you on that
Yeah.
strip. Cheers. Cheers. Next year, we will be toasting an Eagles Super Bowl win. Okay?
Fly, Eagles,
Sure
fly.
Here, I can bless you guys.
We have the chef who created them. That's the pastry chef here at Harvest, Jordan Keller. Jordan, thanks for doing this for us.
Absolutely.
And not only for us, but for those folks that are watching, just describe each of these desserts for us if you can.
Okay, absolutely. So we have a snickerdoodle cheesecake with a plain cheesecake, snickerdoodle crumb, and then vanilla whipped cream with a whole snickerdoodle right on top there. Next to that is a apple brown Betty, which is our vegan dessert for this menu. So it's vegan apple pie filling, a streusel crumb, and then a vegan whipped cream with a cinnamon dusting. And then we have our chocolate salted caramel dessert, which is a chocolate ganache, a flourless chocolate cake, a salted caramel sauce, and then chocolate mousse, and it's garnished with a little bit of Maldon sea salt. We also have our butterscotch Bodino dessert, which is a pretzel crust at the bottom, a butterscotch Bodino filling. It's like a creme brulee almost, texture-wise, and then caramel sauce, vanilla whipped cream, and then some toasted macadamia nuts right on the top as the garnish. And then we have our cannoli dessert, which is a ricotta pound cake, a ricotta and mini chocolate chip cannoli filling, a pistachio crumble, and then an in-house made cannoli chip right on top.
That's
amazing.
Yeah.
So
You
good.
concepted all this, huh?
Yes, I make all of our desserts for the company. The chocolate dessert is actually the only one that I haven't done. It was on the menu before I started here.
And these rotate. So just what's your favorite one you've ever come up with?
My favorite one is honestly probably the snickerdoodle cheesecake.
Tasty, but there's so much variety.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dig in.
Let's do it. Well, gentlemen, it was a fantastic dinner. And was it good?
Oh, it's amazing.
Now, is this a shot?
Well, you do have to scoop it out. We get dessert too. How about
This
that?
is awesome.
Perfect.
And I will say this as we end our segment here today on Weather Wagers: a steak dinner with some cocktails with dessert
Yep.
always tastes better when Dan pays for it.
Heck
I
yeah.
hope I'm getting a raise.
Cheers.
No shot at that.
I was
But
gonna say I haven't seen anything yet.
that was a great way to celebrate. Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
thank you, Dan.
Sure.
Appreciate you pulling out the big bucks for that
Well,
one.
I mean, it was worth it. What a day at the office, boys.
Yeah, wasn't a bad day to show up for
No,
sure.
and that's not necessarily the reason we started this podcast, but I will tell you, we love wagering on each other too.
Yes, and there will be more of this to come.
I just like the free ride, to be honest.
Well, there you go.
Maybe I need to get involved
Well,
in this
you know,
a little.
Listen,
you know,
Shiner, we can't thank you
Season
enough.
3, we'll get on
We've
it.
asked you about some of the unders
Oh,
and the
yeah,
overs
for sure.
and giving
Well,
Brett a
sure.
hard time.
And I do think people do like to know a couple of things, and that is at a TV station or at a podcast studio. Yes, Dan and I are the front-facing talent. We do the on-camera
And
stuff.
talent's a rough word.
And talent is a rough word.
Local
but-
celebrity, I believe we call it.
But we don't just take our jobs, unseriously. Dan and I are skilled meteorologists, and we are skilled on-air broadcasters. And I don't say that from an ego thing, but you do have to have a skill. But so do other people. And we want to thank Sarah as part of our team for arranging this. We want to thank David Shiner, because without him, we don't look as good.
No.
We don't get the camera shots. He's punching everything up over there. And so he is an integral part. And then we do want to thank Anna, who shot and edited that piece too.
Yeah, great job, Anna.
She was fantastic. And they got
And
to
she
eat
put
a
up
little
with
bit
us.
too.
Yeah.
They got to eat a
Yeah,
little bit too. So that was fun. She put up with our antics, but that is all good. So we're going to get to our In the Spotlight segment coming up. But you know what's in the spotlight this weekend is some weather. And I thought it would be
Yeah.
good to have a discussion, Dan, because because there's been a lot of buzz online
Well, I was
about
going to say everybody else is. Why not us?
yeah, about a nor'easter that could have an impact across the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. Now, earlier in the week, we kind of, I don't want to say wrote it off completely, but we shrugged because as we get later into February, right, we start to get warmer and everything has to really line up perfectly. Now, listen, we've gotten February snowstorms before. There's no doubt about it.
Usually earlier in the month if they're going to be big.
But I will also say that, you've got to have everything from a meteorological textbook to align.
You're talking alignment again, huh?
Talking alignment again. Yeah, I sound like James Franklin. We're going to talk more about him coming up. But we need cold air. You need a good placement of a low-pressure system that's hugging the coast. And you also need the northern jet to phase with the southern jet that brings the moisture. And unless all of that happens, and you also need a western ridge over Boise. Remember our old professor, Weather World extraordinaire Fred Godomsky?
The Boise Ridge.
The Boise Ridge. And he would always say it that way. And so you need it. And so these are ingredients we look for.
And there's some of that.
There's some of it. I'm not sure there's all of it. So let's get to the map, Dan, because really on Saturday we have piece number one that I like to say of this storm. Saturday here is going to be a nice day. Piece number one is some rain that's going to fall across the Carolinas. But tell everybody what we do think is going to be the issue on Saturday, and that would be temperatures.
Well, and so here's the deal. We tend to see more storminess, more chances for storms when things warm up. And so Saturday's the warm up. Temperatures 40s, maybe near 50 degrees.
Yeah.
And so there's no, as we say, antecedent cold air or cold air leading into the storm in this case. However, moisture's at play, and that's the big deal. So when we get a temperature contrast like we see on Saturday into Sunday, that leads to storminess. So there's the Saturday piece, but now here's Sunday.
Right, and this is where a low is going to form and then work its way toward the coast, almost becoming a secondary low. Now, here's the thing that I will point out. If you can get the low in the right place, it is going to pull in cold enough air. Now, to make it
At
snow...
least in the higher elevations of the atmosphere.
Well, correct. Now, couple of issues here. One is, yes, higher elevations. Two is, somebody asked me today, a great question online. Facebook follower and viewer said, how can it rain today when it's 36, and how can it snow on
Very good
Sunday when
question.
it's 36? I'll let you answer that, but I basically said it's not about the 36. It's not about what happens at the ground.
No. So at the ground, like right now, we are socked in on this Thursday, and actually temperatures, I woke up to the same temperature I went to bed with last night, 37 degrees.
Yeah, hasn't moved.
It's because there's so much moisture. Everything's very saturated, and we have a layering of the atmosphere. I was just talking about this in my oceanography course, that essentially it's all density driven. Remember the whole idea of density, M over V, back in grade school science. So if
you're listening to this podcast for betting purposes, people probably don't remember that, but we're teaching you.
You might want to know a little bit of math.
Yeah.
So M over V, that's our density. But essentially you have different densities of air layered across the atmosphere, and they all don't talk to each other. Now, if you get a lot of wind and you get a lot of mixing, then they start to chatter and they start to mix together.
But we've had stagnant air. That was the
Totally
issue
stagnant
yesterday.
air, and that's why there's
yeah.
air pollution kind of stuck over central Pennsylvania. There's no movement. Well, there will finally be movement over the weekend. First, the warm air comes in up above and then down to the surface on Saturday. But what's going to happen Sunday, as you mentioned, that storm forming, a little bit of a northerly flow, cold air above what was a warmer surface. So we will see how much cold air actually gets here in time for the storm. I mentioned this on the podcast before. Models tend to overdo how much cold actually develops. We go back to this past weekend. Some models had a lot of snow for this past Sunday. How much snow did we get?
We got a dusting.
We got a dusting. So
again, and even if, let's say this model, and I'm not saying I'm going to show you we're going to show you the model numbers here, but I would not show this on broadcast, but this is Weather Wagers, so we can take a look.
We like numbers.
What I will say is that, too, even let's say a model spits out 6 inches of snow for the weekend, what's going to happen is the first inch or two is not going to stick because of the warm surface temperatures on Saturday. So you have to take that into account.
And the roads will be warm, too. We have to keep that in mind.
The roads will be very warm. Now, here is Sunday overnight. So this particular model, this is the European, has it starting Sunday morning and continuing into Sunday night. This would be somewhat of a decent snow. But, Dan, I just want to point this out because here's my issue with the European. I think it catches on to the idea of some phasing, but where's the moisture still?
It's all east of us. And we know by that point the rates of snowfall will drop here locally.
Right. So I want to point out, because there's a lot of bozos out there on social media
Plenty of them.
that post willy-nilly snow totals, okay? Oh, we're getting 2 feet of snow. Listen, folks, we're not getting 2 feet of snow. We're not getting a foot of snow.
It may snow more over the open ocean than it does here.
Correct. We just showed you where the moisture is. But this is the latest European model, and everybody always puts stock in it. I'm just saying this, to me, would be probably the worst case scenario. Now, again, we'll track this. It is only Thursday. But, Dan, how much snow is this? It's like, 1 to 3 inches, maybe 2 to 4. This is not a lot of snow. If we get it and it cools down and it snows on Sunday and we're in the right zone for it, we can get a measurable snowfall. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. Now, keep in mind, everybody, too, what the model doesn't do well with is what's melting at the surface. This is just snow falling.
And that was my point earlier.
Yeah, this is just snow literally falling from the sky down to the ground. What happens at the ground is so important. How much of this simply just falls as what looked like rain if you didn't know what was going on.
And again, that's what happened last Sunday.
Yes.
There may be 3-4 hours of snow that just doesn't stick, and then that's going to chew away at those totals. But that's again why we wanted to show you them. Mm-hmm. This model's not spitting out. It certainly has tracked toward a snowier solution, but it's also not spitting out 6, 8, 10 inches of snow. It's saying there's going to be maybe some snow on Sunday. Some of it could accumulate, but let's wait and see here. Now, again, is there a chance this turns into a decent snowstorm? Yeah. There is. Yeah. There is. And that's why I started mentioning it today. We can't totally write it off. Do I think it's going to be a blockbuster? Nope. I think we saw that one in January. We'll see. And even that, what happened with that? It had sleet with it.
And here's the deal, everyone. If this storm was stalling nearby and if it wasn't expected to keep moving, sure, absolutely. Then we could see maybe some prolonged snow and heavier snow.
And I will say on that note, though, Dan, I have seen in the guidance that this does want to linger this into Monday. And I will say, too, keep in mind the timing is not – the models don't know what's going to happen yet. The European has this thing in here Sunday morning. If this is a daylight storm, exactly what Dan said is going to happen. A lot of melting is going to happen. Other models show this as more of a Sunday night storm. Now, if you want a little more snow, that would be ideal because anytime you can get a snowstorm at night, then things get a little colder. So there's lots of uncertainties. We just wanted to put the word out. We're watching it. We're tracking it. You can always get our forecast updates on abc27.com or download the weather app because we're always on there, too.
We're always there, too.
Exactly. All right.
Including this podcast. That's another place you can find us. It goes to the weather app, too.
It does. It does. And YouTube.
Yep.
We're everywhere. You can't get rid of us. So next up, we wanted to talk about our we're going to have a lot of guests on the show, and we've already got some lined up, some really big names. We're actually going to start. This is called our In the Spotlight segment, and we are going to put our very own sports director, Allie Berube, in the spotlight. Dan, we talked with her a lot about Penn State, and as we head into the offseason, why did we want to ask her so much about Penn State right now?
Well, so for ABC 27 and for Nexstar, our parent company, she is directing all the coverage of everything Penn State athletics. So she's been there now through the highs and lows of James Franklin, now this coaching search, and now the transfer portal, and what is going on with Penn State men's basketball, but the wrestling team's good, and hockey seems to be trending up, although they lost an overtime game in Beaver Stadium. I think it's something about that stadium. I'm starting to worry.
Yeah.
But regardless, she has been there in first person. I wish I could be there in first person for a lot of these events, but she has seen it. She has lived it. And so I think it's good to get that perspective.
I think so, too. And what I always find interesting, and we always tell people this, listen, we know weather as good as anybody. We're not reporters, though. And that's why we like to interview reporters on this podcast that are inside. And I got to tell you, I thought she was pretty revealing in this interview.
A lot of insight.
A lot of insight and a lot of inside information. Yeah. And that involves the end of the James Franklin era, the beginning of the Matt Campbell era, and what might be ahead for Penn State fans. So,
and what about NIL? What is going on with NIL?
The stadium renovation?
There's changes happening. I mean, there's changes all the time right now in college sports, but this seems to be the peak of change.
It's a wide-ranging interview that covers a lot about Penn State, and we were happy to have her back on the show. She came on during our first season, and now that we were back, we said, Allie, can you stop by? She gave us a lot of her time. We appreciate it, and now we want to get to our In the Spotlight interview. Here's our chat with ABC 27 Sports Director Allie Berube.
All right, another exciting interview here on Weather Wagers. Today we welcome one of our own, our sports director here at ABC 27, also the director of Nittany Nation for our Nexstar overall company. Welcome in Allie Berube. Allie, welcome to the show, and thanks for your time today.
Yeah, really excited to be here. I love when all these crossovers happen. And we've had you guys both on a number of our shows, Nittany Nation, some of our Eagles specials, and things of that nature, because it always seems like if football is being played, there's weather in the mix.
Well, there usually is, and we've had you on before a while ago. We wanted to have you back because there's lots to talk about, especially concerning Penn State. Just briefly tell us and the audience, in case they don't know, and hopefully most of them do, what Penn State sports you have covered so far this year, and talk about sort of Nittany Nation and the goal of our show.
Yeah, well, I love the way that Nexstar is positioned across the country. First of all, we own over 200 stations nationwide. And so it gives us this really powerful network of reporters, particularly in the Big Ten. We have reporters in most markets or very close to it. And so when it comes to Nittany Nation, we're the home for all things Penn State athletics. We primarily focus on a few sports, but we dip our toes into all 31 of their Division I teams, and the alumni and the lettermen and all these different facets of what make Penn State what it is. And I know I'm lecturing to Penn Staters right now, so I don't need to get too far into it, but it's such a huge athletic department with really some national implications. It's one of the only athletic departments in the country that's profitable. And of course, the Big Ten gets so much attention for things like football, basketball, wrestling. And we've done all of those in the last couple of weeks, honestly. Football never seems to stop. This football season, I really wanted it to stop at a certain point.
Us too.
A little exhausting. And I think, but it shows you the power of the fan base. And what we try to do with Nittany Nation is reflect that. The conversations that people are having on social media, we want to bring that to the screen, but with an expert twist to it and some context and some interviews. And it's been a pleasure. I've covered Penn State for 8 years, but we've adopted a larger role with the overall Nittany Nation coverage here in the last couple, and no shortage of things to talk about. Today, I'm going to get on some of our shows and talk about the top-ranked Nittany Lions, who just dismantled the number 2 team in the country, Ohio State wrestling, I should clarify. And that's every single season. It feels like you have a really positive team to highlight. And luckily for Penn State, they don't swing and miss that often.
Well, yeah, that's a team. I was going to say quick, that's a team that every Penn State athletic program is trying to emulate, right? The wrestling team.
Yeah, and they're bringing Cale Sanderson in to basically every single other team to talk about what makes them successful, because what he's been able to build there with a dozen national championships and countless like Olympians and world medalists and things like that. A lot of people want to know what the secret is. He won't tell you, but I think a lot of it has to do with the kind of guy that they recruit, and then also the mindset that he instills in them. But we could talk about wrestling forever. Luke Dreyer on our sports team has a podcast called Map Minds that he's diving well into the Penn State, each match of the duel and why. And I'm learning a lot. That is not a sport I grew up with. But if you're going to learn about wrestling, you might as well do it with the best team in the country.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the paradigm, right? This year is so bizarre that you have a sport at the top of the NCAA level, and then you have the football program, for instance, that's trying to really assert itself at the top. And you have a basketball team, a basketball set of programs that is struggling. So really a bizarre year for Penn State athletics, at least from the outside looking in. Do you have some favorite moments, at least, thinking positively from the year that you've covered so far?
Oh, look at our glass half full.
We have to.
if you had asked me in October, listen, like, sports reporters live for football season. It's by far the craziest, but you have so much going on. There's so much to talk about, and we're lucky enough to cover what is usually a top 10 team in the country. And so, and then I drank the Kool-Aid all summer, right? They came off the college football playoff semifinal appearance, and there's national title aspirations. And I bought in. I hoped. They had so much of that roster coming back, and then it just fell apart basically from the beginning. And I think now we all know we were sold a bag of goods that might have been empty. And it looked really bleak in October. And then it continued to look bleak for the rest of October, right? As they're going through that coaching search. With that being said, like, I have never felt as impactful in our role, right? Being able to reflect Nittany Nation, being able to ask the hard questions, being able to sit in those press conferences and finally kind of crack through the truth that we had been looking for, for 8 years. And I also think it's like that's where I saw just how passionate Penn State fans are. Because it didn't just go away on Sunday when the Eagles started playing, right? It lasted for 45 days or whatever it was. And then you saw the positive come back. I think some things that I love just from the fall because it's fresh on my mind because we were with the new coaching staff last week. Terry Smith, like what a positive silver lining of that entire experience. I have known Terry for a number of years, and I know a lot of people know him as like the player, and he has a couple good sound bites when they let us interview him once a season, and he seems to be someone who always says the right thing about how much he loves Penn State. But you guys just got like the full picture of who Terry Smith is that we did see behind the scenes a lot of times, and I knew him more as a family man. Like we talked about his family almost exclusively for 7 years, and then I was like, "Oh, let's ask you football questions." Like I'm not, and he's very good at that too. But I loved that. And then standing behind him at the Pinstripe Bowl when they're dumping the bucket of grass clippings on him and things like that, the bad boy mower Pinstripe Bowl, and watching him just realize how far he came. And honestly, we can talk about moments that have saved Penn State football, but what he was able to do in those last 6 weeks while they were free falling, and then to win a Pinstripe Bowl and win out those last 4 games, we might look at that as a moment that might have saved Penn State football. So that was awesome. Meeting Matt Campbell and his staff, I think there's a lot of positive there. And we can dive into it. We can dive into it for the next year or hopefully 10 if he has a really successful run here. But Matt is a breath of fresh air, and everyone who's around the program will tell you it feels new. And I think while there is so much good that happened under the James Franklin era, the end was bad. And I think fresh air is good. The best thing I've seen, not to be as long-winded as you guys know I am when I lecture you about Penn State, the ice hockey games in Beaver Stadium. When they announced them, I thought you guys are insane. And then as we approached it and I was listening very intently to the forecast, I thought we are all insane. And then I heard a lot of rumblings that week, like, I'm not going to go, it's too cold. I'm not going to go, it's too cold. Yes, it was 0, I believe. And it felt like a lot less than 0 degrees.
Oh yeah, it was in the negative teens and 20s during the actual game itself, wind chill wise.
Okay, well, I would say it definitely felt like that.
Yeah.
I stopped looking at a certain point because we were just going to be outside, so I didn't really want to know too much. And I will tell you, 75,000 people showed up for the men's game against Michigan State. The hype around the men's program obviously is sky high. However, it felt like 75. Sometimes they announce the attendance and you're like, there's not 100,000 people in here. No, the whole lower bowl was filled, and that's in construction, and that's in negative teens and negative 20s feels likes. And there were so many other things going on campus, like wrestling wrestled Nebraska the night before. The men's team played on Friday and Saturday. Like there was a lot of stuff going on. It was a freezing cold weekend, but that was like the best spectacle I think I've seen. I would put it up there with like some of the best sports moments that I've covered just for what it was and how unique it was.
That's awesome.
I could keep listing them, but I think those were like the big highs.
People have been clamoring for this since I was in undergrad, so that's going back 15 years ago. It's just impressive they were able to pull it off, and it was always, we got to winterize the stadium. Well, I think they had a pretty good test of how the stadium can hold up in the cold.
That was the first phase of the renovation, right?
Yes.
Pat Kraft said the first $70 million that they did was, I think, almost exclusively winterizing the pipes and changing the toilets. And that cost $70 million, which is amazing. But it was to host events 365. And let me tell you, like, it did not come without its challenges. Everyone knew it would be cold in January in State College on top of a giant hill, like no shock. But I guess and you guys would know this way better than I did, but the overnight temperatures
Mm-hmm.
actually hurt the ice. At a certain point, it was too cold and the ice became too brittle. I have no idea. And so there was like during the men's game, they stopped every like 5 minutes and were working hard on the ice in the far end zone away from the south tunnel, the north end zone, I guess that would be. Because there was a huge gash that kept like reappearing. No one really confirmed, but there was possibilities that like pipes within the ice might have ruptured underneath. Because again, like an ice arena is cold, but it's not negative,
that cold, right?
And so, but I think by all accounts, they thought it was really successful. And the ice crew, I think one of the guys might have actually slept on the ice every day to try and keep it a little bit warmer overnight. But they worked so hard to get that many people on the ice too. They had 750 public skaters, plus family skates for the teams, plus a club game, plus little youth games. To get that many people through the ice successfully, and only really one game had a big issue, and it was the club game on Thursday at 9:30 p.m. So I don't think anyone was upset about going inside. I thought it was super impressive. And then for the fans to show up to see that, I know I talked to a lot of them who said like next thing's Flyers Pens in Beaver Stadium. And if I know anything about Pat Kraft, he has already called the NHL. He has already sent them the specs. He's already sent them the videos. He sent them the ticket revenue. Because I think that is the goal for Penn State. I don't know that you do it every year because the facility had to be like hockey focused for 2 weeks, and that's expensive. And it might have even been longer than 2 weeks by the time they laid the boards down. But what a successful first run.
I want to go back and I want to slip in two questions here, Dan, because
go ahead.
Allie, when you were talking, you made me think of something. We talk about sports from a fan perspective, but I got to witness you doing what you do as a reporter. The night that Penn State lost to UCLA, okay, we were at an awards. No, we were at it was a dinner. It was a dinner, and we were at the same table. And I was listening to the things that were going on, and also keeping one eye on the UCLA game. And Penn State goes down, totally unexpected, especially, coming out of the Oregon loss. Everybody thought, okay, UCLA, perfect way to bounce back. And then your phone just started blowing up, and all of a sudden the night got very busy for you. Can you just talk about that experience and what it's like to all of a sudden have to, you're spending a night out, you're doing something fun that we do for ABC 27, but all of a sudden you had to just switch into reporter mode.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Like there's so many things about that couple, like 3-4 week stretch there, but I do. That dinner was lovely. I think I had 2 bites and then did leave. We were getting ready for the event and watching the first half. And we didn't travel to UCLA. We have a station out in LA. So I will travel for games if they're big or if we don't have a station. LA is really expensive. And so we made the gamble. They fired all of their coaches. We're not going to fly out to LA and spend a couple $1,000s for a game that Penn State should easily handle coming off of an Oregon game that went to double overtime. You were right there with Oregon. Like this shouldn't be a problem. So we had made the decision, and I watched the first half and had to leave to drive to downtown Harrisburg. And I thought to myself, that doesn't feel great. But we were representing our station at an event. So I was like, well, we're going to go. And yeah, it is interesting because it's like you guys, right? A big storm's coming. We were just talking about this before we got on. Like you're always working. Right now, if a certain person calls me, I have to hang up the phone and answer that one with you guys, And so it's like, I'm not at the level where that happens a lot, but it did happen this fall with Penn State. And immediately, right, I have people I know who are on the plane on the way back. So you're wondering, like, what's the chatter? That's 2 in a row, but that's a really bad loss. What do they feel like? Because I'm gonna have to flip around and talk about it all day on Sunday. And so, the right person sends you a text and you're like, yep, I'm not eating dessert now. I'm out the door. I got to answer that, And so, you're just trying to gather information. Now it's easy to talk about in retrospect, but, it was pretty clear after the Oregon game, the message that was sent to the football program is stop the bleeding, essentially. And so when they didn't stop the bleeding against UCLA, the writing was on the wall from there, which was more what I needed to deal with for the next like week is what happens if Northwestern doesn't go the way they want it to go. And is the leash now? Because there was a conversation that if you lost to an unranked team, is that it? At one point. And so that was like the immediate, okay, you just lost to UCLA. Like, is he getting on the plane? Kind of a situation, you know?
So following up on that, the interesting thing I found was, as a fan and as somebody that has followed James Franklin and the team for years, I knew after the Oregon loss, he had this blank stare on his face, right, on the field. And I thought, okay, it's over. And it really doesn't matter what happens. I mean, maybe short of making a playoff run, but I just thought it's over. But I think the national media started to catch on to this, that we're not as, in tune with the comings and goings of Penn State every week. When you asked James Franklin, do you want to be Penn State's head coach? I believe that was your question, right?
Yeah,
so just
yeah.
to refresh everybody what his answer was. I mean, it was really a non-answer, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that was the problem, was that it was a non-answer. And the question is not, is James Franklin a good recruiter? Frankly, the question is not, is he a good coach? It's not any of these things. Like, you don't hold that job and win a Big Ten title and get to the college football playoff semifinal if you're not one of the best at what you do. You cannot fake it for that long. However, his attitude changed completely in the off season, and we all noticed it, right? He started not saying like he started guaranteeing things, like, we're gonna do this, like, and not in a way where it's 1-0 mentality. Like, he started talking about things that were happening a year from then, and I think it was a change in his philosophy, but it also reflected some of the pressures that the program started getting under. That was a conversation. They were on the plane on the way back from losing to Notre Dame, and the conversation is, you have to get back there next year. Not like, we want to get back, like, no, you have to get back there, and that's the expectation. And so he flipped his mindset. I saw it the same look you're talking about in the fourth quarter, down 2 touchdowns against Oregon, and the student section started chanting "Fire Franklin." Let's keep in mind, at the oldest, they're 24-year-old kids. At the youngest, they're 17, right? They're going to say whatever they want to say. Michigan just chanted "Go to jail" at Gavin McKenna at the hockey game. Like, students are going to do what they're going to do. You can't listen to it. And so, but he did. And he made a comment to one of his staffers that was like, "Can you believe that?" Essentially, a little bit more colorful on the sidelines. And then they came back and they pushed it to double overtime, and everyone kind of believed, like, wait a sec, wait. And then Drew throws and then Drew throws the pick, and you saw the exact same look, the look you're talking about. And you were like, okay. Then we get to practice on Wednesday, and Tony Rojas, after the Oregon game, Tony Rojas out with a season-ending injury. And you would have thought, like, it felt like a death. Like the way that they were acting, it felt like someone had died. And maybe it was the hopes of the season. I mean, we can get dramatic about it, but it really was like, okay, Tony's a good player, but like, your linebacker, like, essentially, like, aren't you supposed to be next man up? Like, you have Amari Campbell, who had a great season. Like, what are we doing? But it felt like all the air sucked out of the tires. So they lose to UCLA. And again, I had known, like, his leash was really short this season. And I was being told that, and some of the people that were texting me had a decent amount of influence, and they were fed up and, whatever. And I watched Drew walk out of the locker room in the tunnel at Beaver Stadium before the Northwestern game with a towel over his head, head down. He can't wear his helmet because it's the green dot, so it's out on the field. So, like, I wasn't upset about that part, but towel, head down, shoulders slumped before a game. And I said, all right, your starting quarterback, like, is a mess, and he threw an interception in the first quarter that I looked at everyone and said, this has changed. Like, our story is completely different now. Trash started hitting us on the sidelines because people were throwing stuff. Anyways, long way to say, I looked at James at the end of the game, and the people that were saying goodbye to him are not people that normally, like, dap him up after a game, win or lose, doesn't matter. It was everyone. It was every single player. It was every single staff member. And he stood there for 10, 15 minutes, not moving, staring up, looking around, taking it in. And again, like, you guys, you followed it. I've covered him. I've been in a lot of rooms with him, both for media and private events. And I feel like I knew enough about who he is. He was, if not done, tired. you know? And so I think there's a lot of ways I could have asked the question. I didn't really think about it. I should probably come up with a different story if I planned this. But everyone was kind of asking their questions, and of course Drew got hurt in that game, so a lot of the focus was like, what is up with Drew? And also like 3-game losing streak, like how do you bounce back? And the way he was answering those questions was also giving up. And so came to my turn. I think I was like the 7th or 8th question. And I could have said, like, do you deserve to be the head coach? Should you be the head coach? But you're going to get a really like antagonistic answer if you ask anyone that. Hey, Brett, do you want to be the meteorologist at ABC 27? Like, do you deserve that job? Like, no, everyone's going to get a little chippy. And so I just wanted to give him an opportunity to say kind of what he wanted to say, plead for your job, essentially. And so I said, do you want to still be the head coach here at Penn State? And do you have faith that this is a group of people that can turn it around? Because it kind of felt like no on both. And his answer was, I love my players and they're hurting right now. And essentially went for about 30, 45 seconds on that. Never once said, I love Penn State. Never once said, I care so much about this school. He cares a lot about his players, but he was done with the school. And he was done with the fan base, to be honest. And so I think and the way he's talked about Penn State since taking the Virginia Tech job, my previous institution and things of that nature tells you a lot about how personally he took the criticism at the end. And it was as sour as you guys felt like it was from the outside. It was ugly on the inside.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just told the story so well. And I still feel like, I'm a big fan of his. I will probably watch some Virginia Tech games.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a student during the Sandusky scandal. What he brought to the table coming out of that, I will never, ever forget it.
Right.
And it was a sad ending to me. But we look ahead now, and he's no longer the head coach of Penn State football. We have Matt Campbell. We have his staff. And you got to go to Media Day, as you mentioned, and meet the staff and talk to people and coming out of recruiting and some of the criticism thereof of recruiting, at least from the outside media. What was that vibe like? You're saying it's refreshing. What about it is refreshing, and what do you think we have to look forward to?
Yeah, again, X's and O's, I think it's way too early to really know. They're about to start spring practice. I say about in a month. So they're like firmly in winter workouts. And so I think when it comes to what the product looks like, we can see their Iowa State tape. They brought over a ton of kids from Iowa State. I think you're still going to see a lot of transition at the wide receiver position with the guy they brought with them leaving and hiring a new wide receiver coach, and a lot of comings and goings. However, the pieces of Penn State that stayed, the players, the coaches, they're the right group of Penn State, the group that the Letterman back, the type of kid that Penn State's always wanted to recruit and has recruited. So I think that like the continuity is there, even though it might not look like it necessarily from a roster and coaching standpoint. But as far as new, right, it's actually they're very close. Like the coaches Matt brought with him are very close. So you're seeing guys who like Taylor Mouser and the offensive line coach Ryan Clayton are best friends, and like, of course I'm sure you're going to have that, but like they hang out all the time. Their wives hang out. Like you're just starting to see like, okay, like they didn't just bring like everyone at Iowa State. They brought like the core group of who made Iowa State successful for the last couple of years. The way Matt talks in his press conference, so I think we had two extremes. We have like James, who wouldn't really tell you anything in his press conferences, but would talk for a really long time.
Yeah,
then you
very
had Terry,
much controlled the message, sure.
Right. And then you had Terry, who told you everything in like a one sentence, like, why isn't AJ Harris playing? Because he got beat on the touchdown, And so it's like you had those extremes. And I think Matt will trend more towards James, because I think someone who's led a Division I program, they all have similar messaging, but it comes from like such a sincere place. And the things he's talking about feel, frankly, they just feel more sincere, right? He's listing dozens of players from Paterno days. He's talking about what they did with hockey, like it was his team playing out there, and honestly, he stood outside for perhaps longer than I did. Like he was out there for a very long time after he dropped the puck. His whole team was there. Like, and these are guys, some of them, you know, Polynesian, who one kid looked at me and he was like, "Is it always this cold?" And I said, "Well, no." But they were out there for the whole game. Like this is a program that wants to embrace what Penn State athletics is, which is not just your football and you go home. And I think that was part of what the issue was with Penn State is like they got so isolated in the football program that when things started going bad, you had nothing else to lean on, you know. And so Rocco Becht, our you know, new starting quarterbacks in promotions for the men's hockey game. He just did something for Thon, and these are not NIL deals. These are just part of the university, you know, and representing the university. And so I think you're seeing the staff everywhere. Now, maybe that's a, you know, first 6 months on the job thing, and that's time will tell. But you're seeing them everywhere. They're having a good time. They're talking to everyone. I had people at the last men's hockey game in Pagula that I was at who were like, Matt Campbell's in the elevator. And I was like, well, he has to get to the suites. Like, that's the only way, you know? And they were like, no, but he walked in and shook everyone's hand in the elevator and didn't like say, like, I'm Matt. He just like shook everyone's hand and said, like, oh, are we excited for tonight? Like, big game, you know? And it was like, just like a normal guy. And again, I think if you look at the early days of James Franklin, very similar, very similar. James was very good at being an ambassador of Penn State, but it's the buy-in that I'm hearing from people in the building who have worked under now both administrations. And they say it feels different. And I might not be able to be in the facility every day, but I'm going to trust the people who are.
Sure.
And I think the other part that I think is huge, and this is what I will say was a criticism that I think was appropriate for James, is he wanted to focus on his tenure and what he was building at Penn State from 2014 to the end. He did not want to talk about the 80, you know, years that happened before him, to the point where it was awkward. You know, like names would get brought up and he, who,
Sure.
you know, and it's like, all right, come on. Like the guy had the job for 40 years and did a lot of good. And regardless of whether or not you want to talk about Joe Paterno or not, you're ignoring 4 generations or 4 decades of players. And that's how they felt. And what Matt did in his first 6 months, they're dealing with the portal, which holy cow, was that something to deal with for this type of a roster. They're trying to retain high school players, trying to get their Iowa State commits to maybe flip a little bit, a couple of them. But in that time frame, once a week, he sat down for 2 hours on a Zoom with the decades of Letterman. I think they said they started in the 60s. I think that would be like the last living ones. I was trying to remember, but they did 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and then they did like the 2010s to now, kind of all together, or 2000s, then 2010 to now all together. And he wanted them, like, he introduced himself, but he wanted them just to talk about Penn State and not like a tell me about it, like a what do you want this program to be? Like I want to reflect that. And so the feedback I've heard from those groups of Lettermen, were like, we're invited in, you know, and he wants to know and he wants to represent us. And you guys know, like, that's such a point of pride for Penn Staters, whether you're a Letterman or a student. Like, you want to feel like you're still a part of the conversation. And these are guys who literally gave blood, sweat, and tears for the university, who felt for a decade that they were not allowed to be there. And I think to fix that is going to open a lot of doors, because you're talking about Hall of Famers in the NFL, college football Hall of Fame. Like, you're talking about a group of people that could really help this program. And you want, like, that's the power of Penn State. Like, you need that, you know?
Yeah, and pivoting off that just for a bit, well, actually continuing on that, because everything you've said has been fascinating to me.
Yeah.
I'm just sitting here taking it in, but I think it's too early to have expectations for Matt Campbell's first year. Like, I have no idea what to expect.
Right.
But let me ask you, what do you think is a reasonable expectation? And then maybe a tougher question, given how the hiring process went down. I mean, is Pat Kraft's job tied directly to the success of this hire here?
Yeah. Yeah, well, it is your biggest hire, right? It's
Yep.
the most money. And then if you look at the way they're splitting revenue, right? They're giving $15-16 million of their revenue sharing to football. So, and you're building a $700 million stadium. So, like, while it may not hinge on, what is he, 45-year-old Matt Campbell or whatever the heck he is, your success as an athletic department does hinge on football. So how long is that leash? I am not sure. What happened in the coaching search with how many public fails it had and how confusing it was, and like, oh, I didn't call the right agent, my bad, and whatever.
Yeah,
All of
I thought
that.
that was probably the
That stuff is
biggest.
private. Sorry, right? A lot of times that doesn't get out.
Yeah, all of it felt awkward and
Right.
mishandled. And then they have the introduction press conference, and we got to ask Pat, and someone said, like, hey, that leaked audio. And he stumbled through the whole answer in a way where I felt like, did no one coach you on this? Like, like, you should have had a very polished answer for that leaked audio because you were going to get asked about it. And so it felt clunky. I think I've seen Pat and Matt together all the time. I feel like I'm going to say it 100 times, so I better coin it, but they're at wrestling together. They're at hockey together. They're everywhere, and they seem to really get along well. So I know however it happened in the 11th hour, I think Penn State did get the right guy. And I think it's kind of one of those, like, who cares how it happened, because it happened, and they've kind of survived all the public scrutiny of the 45 days and the disaster that was. And in general, the donors are happy. The high stakeholders for Penn State are happy with the hire. So all's well that ends well, I think, on that front. However, your point is a good one. What does success look like? I think if this was James Franklin still here and Penn State did whatever they did, made the playoffs this past season, and you look at the schedule, you say, like, how are you not undefeated, right? Like, I know you had to find a quarterback, but like, it's a pretty favorable schedule for Penn State this year. Even their road games aren't bad, and so I would want to say that I think a lot of people are throwing out like that 8-4 mark as kind of a realistic expectation. And I would say, yeah, probably. Um, it sounds dumb, but like, I have no idea how you bring together people, this many pieces from this many different places, and make that work with 15 spring practices and like a month of training camp. I think a much different situation, but when I was reflecting on, we did a big Nittany Nation pregame live show outside Beaver Stadium a couple years ago that Dan was on about Ohio, right? And the upset that was Bill O'Brien coming in and losing to Ohio. And I'm not saying it's the same thing, because it's clearly a different scenario. However, I don't know, Temple at the Link, like, there's some weird things that happen at the beginning of this schedule where if they falter, I wouldn't necessarily be surprised. However, Matt Campbell's not coming out and saying, like, I'm winning a national championship this year. Everything he's saying is, like, I'm trying to set a foundation for Penn State that's not a disaster this season. Like, he talked about it on signing day. Like, I just wanted to get enough guys in here that we could, like, lay a foundation for 2026 and build on that and not, like, go backwards. And keep in mind, right? Like, they won 7 games last year. So, like, I think anywhere close to 500 or above, people should feel okay about, as long as the narrative stays sincere. I think that's the thing. I don't think Penn State expects a 12-win season every year. I don't think Penn State fans expect, like, we have to win a national championship or everything is a failure. I think it's just, you want to feel like you're rooting for people that are being honest with you and that are working very hard. And I think that like blue collar lunch pail mentality and an 8-4 record, I actually believe that, like, Penn State fans would be okay with it for a little bit, but once you get your feet under you, you got to establish a program. I think, and I know at some point we were going to talk about this before I started giving you 8-minute answers, but like, that is also like the Mike Rhodes problem right now with men's basketball, right? Is like, we've given you a few years to kind of build it, and it's getting worse, And so I think that's going to be the bar for Matt. The one thing I will tell you, and I've said it a couple times about Pat Kraft's job, it's a tough job, especially now with all the changing and the revenue sharing and the stadium and all that stuff. It's going to be hard to find another athletic director who will sign up to take on the stadium project, in terms of how much money he has to raise to keep that fully funded by athletics. And I don't know that you can fire him and hire someone else who will take on a $535 million shortfall right now. Not many are going to take that debt and feel comfortable going with it.
Yeah, so does that kind of follow up on the basketball program? Does that just kind of set that program back and maybe football takes more of a front seat for a while again? I mean, what is kind of going on there? Do you have
Yeah.
any insight?
Yeah, it's first of all, I want to start with like Mike Rhodes is an awesome human.
Yeah, I love the hire. I mean, I was
Right.
excited too.
Right. And like I don't think that this is necessarily right now a like Rhodes isn't getting it done. The reality of college basketball is you're re-recruiting your roster every 4 months, they're saying, sometimes down to three. Like mid-season, you have guys who are like, I'm gonna sit out because I need more money. And that isn't happening in other sports to the level it is in basketball because it is one or two guys away from being really competitive. That was an issue a couple years ago, pretty publicly,
Yes.
with his program. They're giving him about as much money as they can afford to give him, right? Like in terms of the revenue sharing, he's got a couple million to play around with, but a couple million in college basketball is not what Kentucky is paying or Duke is paying or things of that nature. So expecting him to compete amongst the blue bloods, top 25s with what he has, no. He also has 9 freshmen and 12 new play. Like they have the same thing I'm saying to you about like I don't know if the football program will be ready by August. Like these guys came together a month before their season, you know, and it's less pieces and it's less complicated than football is, but like not in the Big Ten, not when Michigan's dismantling Purdue. Like, and so I think the goal is to be competitive in the Big Ten. And that was really what Rhodes' goal was when he came in. He said, we're going to win Big Ten championships, and that's what he wants. They're so far away from it. At one point, the men's and women's programs were a combined like 0-22 in the Big Ten. And everyone was wondering, like, what do they get fired? I don't know, only because there's not a ton of attention on it. I'm not really privy to Rhodes' contract on what a buyout would be, but I think Penn State should take a we're allergic to buyouts approach for the rest of the year because they're already paying a lot of money for things.
I want a buyout.
I know. I was gonna say, like, wait a sec, I need that agent. But I think about that a lot. Like, there's so many other factors at Penn State that I do think basketball, while in most schools as a rev sport would not get ignored. Like your wrestling program just put 16,000 people in Bryce Jordan Center. They're well on their way to a very successful postseason, and I won't anger Kale by saying anything else. But like you know, like you have other programs that I think hockey, although their captain just got hurt and is done for the season, but like they're really competitive. Women's ice hockey is top 4 in the country and hosting the Frozen Four and like all these other things. So I think when it comes to like the totality of athletics, it might save Rhodes' job for a little bit, and I have no idea about the women's program if that's even a factor for them. I mean, you're winning at this point 2 games, I think, each in the Big Ten, so it should. It in any other scenario, I think you would have to look at it. I think Rhodes is a little protected. 9 freshmen's insane. I just don't know that I don't. He doesn't have the donor base that can like make up the difference on revenue sharing, and the donors who I think would be interested in participating are kind of like prove it that you can win and then I'll invest, and like it's chicken or the egg, right? Like he thinks he needs money to get better players or to support his players more, but if so that they can play better, but if they're not playing better, you can't get the money. So
Right.
it's not great.
Well, I think it's that fascinating push and pull, right? Because these same donors are being hit up by football, and that's when this whole thing started. I just wondered how long are people going to give, and how many people are going to give, and I think we're still trying to figure that out.
Yeah, and how much do they have, right? Like eventually, like all wells are tapped, and people have given the $15 million that they can give, you know.
Right.
And so, I think that's it. Is there's and I think that also in this time frame is going to preserve perhaps some coaches' jobs where they might get a longer leash, only because it's like, look, I got bigger fish to fry, and maybe in a couple years I'll get you some more money, or when the NCAA decides to raise that revenue cap, which is possible, you know, then we'll have more. But like football is always going to take 90% of your money, and then you'll dole it out. I mean, the numbers are almost comical when you get to like volleyball and you're like, oh, $25,000. You're like, everyone can have a pizza, you know? And so it's like, it's just, it is a football world. and you have to consider the fact that you're trying to pack 110,000 people into a building that shook and felt bad, and so they needed to renovate that. It was well overdue. But when you take on a $700 million project, like, you're going to run out of money for other things. I'm curious. The piece of all of this, right, that everyone's kind of like, it's like the Wizard of Oz, the man behind the curtain, is like, what is the Adidas deal? And I really want to know it, because it's like this like shadow thing of like, well, the Adidas deal, we'll just pay for it. The Adidas deal, we'll just, and it's, can you get more than Adidas? Like, can we sponsor the water bottles? I'm curious if that side of corporate revenue in athletics will start shaping some of these conversations more, right? If Luke's gonna get mad at me. Asics, is that the wrestling shoe brand? I have no idea.
I have no idea.
But like, if they want to get in on singlets or whatever, and like, is there, is there things where like you can have other sponsorships to the level of Adidas that can flood more money into your athletic department in creative ways? I think you're going to start seeing college athletics move that way, because the NIL deals of the past, where I'm a car dealership and I want to give Dan a Tesla, those are kind of going away, is what I'm being told. Some of the collectives with the memberships that we were all getting taught, you have a membership for this, a membership for that, and it all goes to like that stuff's getting put on the back burner. So the next year of transition into rev sharing, and as they kind of adopt more of a approach to how this works, I think you'll see certain programs flourish better. Wrestling is successful, one, because of Cale Sanderson's magic sauce, whatever it is, but also because he's always had a really strong donor base. And they just launched a campaign to build their own wrestling facility, because Rec Hall is not cutting it anymore.
Yeah.
For them, they just don't have enough facilities, not enough mats, not enough space. But like, the fact that there's enough confidence within wrestling that their wrestling donors can raise enough to build a building tells you a lot about how much money there is in wrestling. But again, he's winning national championships and his kids are plastered all over the U.S. teams. And so I think that's the difficulty that Rhodes is going to have, is college basketball is a money game, almost more than football is, just because there's so fewer players. So they demand more on an individual basis. And Penn State's not going to look at a football program or a national champion wrestling program or lacrosse or hockey or any of these places and go, let's give it to the team that's won 2 games in the Big Ten. Not going to happen.
Doesn't make sense.
No.
This has been terrific. We're almost out of time, but I want to share my screen, because I want to pull up a photo here of you at this hockey game. I can't do it. I think our host has disabled it. Darn it. Well, we'll show it on the
we'll show it on the podcast.
But
I can reenact it for you if you want.
Well, yeah, there you go. Talk about this big fur coat you had on, because we always tell people on the podcast when they're going to these games, dress for the game. You did, and like I said, we'll show the picture. But you had on this huge fur coat and hat and everything. And my question is, was it cutting it? Did that feel good?
So I had a trial run, because the day before the women's team played at the exact same time, but on Friday. And I wore like a ski suit, and I felt great in the first 2 periods. And then the sun got behind Beaver Stadium and it was horrible. And then somewhere in between the end of the women's game and me running to Pagula to watch a little bit of the men take on Michigan State on Friday, I lost 1 glove. I don't know where. And I was like, those are the only gloves I own. So we're in trouble. So anyways, I get home at midnight. I'm like, we're going to have to, there it is.
There it is.
There it is. Here it is.
So those red gloves, shout out to, the stores that are open before 10 a.m. because I was like, I'm going to have to buy whatever gloves they have. That was the thing. Your hands, like, I don't know, even if you had multiple layers of gloves, that would have felt good. Underneath that giant fur jacket, which is really more like a blanket, I had like thermals and sweatshirts, and I had a heated vest that I never used. Which I thought was impressive.
Huh.
But by the end of it, you were chattering, you were cold. But the first 2 periods were great. Like, while the sun was out and you had the adrenaline of like, wow, this is awesome, that was fine. 3rd period was really bad in both games. Everyone was cold. Everyone, like, your nose is running. I was sick already before we came into it. And so I just didn't feel great. And then the men's game went to overtime. and suddenly your adrenaline is back because there is nothing better than hockey overtime. And so it was fine. I was surprised actually that I had extra things that I never felt like I needed to put on. I would have loved something else for my hands, but I don't know that anything would have helped. It was fine, but that was it. If you were there, you had to have layers, a lot of them, like thermals, sweatshirts, all these things. The one kid who had his chest painted, if you need an intern, call me, and then had his phone number. Like, I'm really proud of you, but I don't know what the frostbite cost you, because
I was going to say, how many cases of frostbite at Mount Nittany Hospital? That
we should actually ask, because he, I'm sure, was there, because by the end of the game, he was almost purple. I wonder, I'm sure he was 21, and I'm sure he didn't feel much at that point. But when he woke up the next morning, I think he had some questions about his own behavior.
Perfect.
I think we should leave it at that.
Yeah, just tell everybody where they can find you on social and on ABC 27 and everywhere.
Yeah. So I'm at Allie Berube on all social media. It's pretty easy. And then at Nittany Nation TV is where you find all of our like Penn State specific content on Instagram and X. And then, of course, we have NittanyNationTV.com and then ABC27.com and ABC27 Sports. But you can find us all over. We're diving into Penn State hosting Big Tens for wrestling championships in a couple of weeks. So we'll be up in State College for that. And hockey, hoping to make runs to the Frozen Four. So never a dull day. And maybe Penn State will make a run in the Big Ten tournament for basketball. And I'll just add it into the mix.
Wishful
thinking.
Thanks again, Allie. Really appreciate your time.
Man, I got to tell you, I just thought that was so revealing. She really laid it all out there in terms of the end of the James Franklin era, Shiner. And I don't know what your reaction is, but clearly it was rocky behind the scenes.
Yeah, I actually direct Nittany Nation with Allie, so we're working on that quite often. And, I think revealing is the biggest part of what you guys were saying about this interview. I mean, Allie is condensed on how much she's allowed to get on air, every single day. And to have this long format, ability to talk about all the inner workings, I think that's the biggest thing. It was like all this pent up stuff that has been wanting to be talked about for so long, just without the outlet. And you gave her that outlet to do so. And, I think the biggest takeaway for me is just, it almost seemed like this was a boom or bust year for Franklin no matter what. And even though there were high expectations, if it did not go well, and it didn't, we saw the downfall of the program a little bit.
And a lot of that had to do with the money that was spent to retain the talent. And also he had been knocking at the door for a while, including last season. And now with the overtime, the double overtime loss, as we said, in front of the home fans, that was sort of the dam breaking. But I did promise Allie we would show this picture. Look at this jacket. I mean, that is she is showing two things.
Chic, I think, is the word they say.
She is showing her style and also how cold it was. Look at that thing, right?
Yeah,
there it was.
That is almost like a blanket, as she was saying.
It is, but it's a good look, and we thank her for her time because Dan and I thought she was just amazing. Let's show you where you can find us. Meteorologist Dan Tomaso, meteorologist Brett Thacker on Facebook, Doppler Dan on X and Twitter, and Brett Thack ABC 27 on X and Instagram for Dan too, I should say. And you can email us weatherwagers@gmail.com. Next week, I know we had teased this week we were going to talk to Sports Illustrated's Mark Wogenrich. He is the editor of Penn State on SI. We are going to have his interview next week. He's got some different takes, and we're going to talk to him about sort of the transition from the James Franklin era to the Matt Campbell era. Dan and I are looking forward to that. Follow us for our latest forecast, too, on the potential weekend nor'easter. Again, we don't think it's going to be a huge deal here, but some accumulating snow is possible. And that is where we will leave it. We're going to have more interviews, more fun as we head into the offseason and then get ready for baseball. Some special guests coming up on the program over the course of the next few weeks. For David Shiner, give a wave. Dan Tomaso had to step out. I'm meteorologist Brett Thacker. Weather Wagers out.